Kirsten, are you ready for your first question? One of the biggest distinctions between Vice Chairperson internal and external is the duty of upkeeping morale. What does morale mean to you? How do you believe it manifests, and how do you plan to improve and elongate it?
Thank you for the question, sir. So what morale means to me is being able to uplift and support one another, even in the most difficult of times. And I believe that's also involving being emotionally invested in one another. As VCI and also as an executive board member, I hope to uphold morale in our board, especially through the board buddy system. Even like during this year alone, some of my most important relationships have come from this board buddy system. And as you can see, like on my bio, like even though like I hold the most board buddy points like ever, it's like this system, like it shows that it has meaning, and it shows that those like investments in time to know someone like truly paid off, because now I have people that I can rely on, like beyond like just Samahan in itself. And then can you also repeat like the last part of that question?
How do you believe it manifests, and how do you plan to improve and elongate it?
Furthermore, I believe that morale manifests in being able to uphold one another, even in, like as I said in my speech, to be able to have those difficult conversations, and to be able to trust each other. And something I like to echo from Daniel's speech too is that being able to, gosh, I'm losing my train of thought. I'm so sorry. To be able to criticize one another, but not out of malice, but out of care. And I think that also helps us as executive board members fulfill their duties to the best of our abilities.
Are you ready for your next question? Another important duty of the Vice Chairperson internal is to navigate board disputes. This can often be difficult, considering that this role cultivates and implicitly requires close and personal relationships with your fellow board members. How do you plan on navigating personal and professional disagreements among your board with the best interests of the entire organization in mind? How will you avoid your own personal biases to remain a neutral party?
Thank you for the question. I think going to answer that is to first set the expectation that not everyone will be able to see eye to eye, and to let alone collaborate effectively. And I believe that going into this position, I really want to focus on fostering at least a sense of trust between our board members. And can you also repeat the question?
The whole question?
Yes.
Okay. Another important duty of the Vice Chairperson internal is to navigate board disputes. This can often be difficult, considering that this role cultivates and implicitly requires close and personal relationships with your fellow board members. How do you plan on navigating personal and professional disagreements among your board with the best interest of the entire organization in mind? How will you avoid your personal biases to remain a neutral party?
To avoid those biases, I think it's also really important to approach every situation with curiosity and empathy first, and to be able to understand where each person is coming from, and I'm so sorry, can you, just the last part.
How do you plan on navigating personal and professional disagreements among your board with the best interest of the entire organization in mind? How will you avoid your own personal biases to remain a neutral party?
So back to what I was saying about really seeing and really empathizing with both sides. I believe like that's the foundation of being able to keep neutral in those situations. Oftentimes I feel like when we only hear one side of the situation, like that very much just leads to having bias, but I also think that it's important to hear those sides at the same time to avoid having like those like initial thoughts of having those biases as well.
Are you ready for your next question? The chairperson and vice chairpersons are one of the closest relationships, and they can set the tone for the entire executive board. How do you plan to work with and alongside the chairperson and your co-vice chairperson, especially in times of stress and conflict?
For that question, can you repeat it one more time?
One question. The chairperson and vice chairpersons are one of the closest relationships, and they can set the tone for the entire executive board. How do you plan to work with and alongside the chairperson and your co-vice chairperson, especially in times of stress and conflict?
I believe that no matter like who the chairperson is, I believe that it's important to prioritize that clear communication and transparency with both my co and also with the chairperson. My role as vice internal is intrinsically to just act as a support system for all my members of board, and that also includes having those conversations about our priorities and concerns with one another, even on a personal level, to understand that stress. And like when that stress also affects our collective board, it's also important to focus on the stability and shared responsibility, even if it stresses us out too, because if one of us falls, all of us fall. And for the chairperson and I think that would look like maybe like proposing like a redistribution of tasks and stepping in to take on additional responsibilities for those around us, and even just simply providing a space to regroup. So this way, like, no one really has to feel alone in carrying this responsibility. And in the event that conflict may rise, I think it's important to prioritize approaching it with respect and openness, and to reiterate, being able to communicate and address those issues directly, but constructively allows us to have broader conversations and make way for transparency and collective understanding.
Are you ready for your next question? Okay. The first role of the VC, according to the Constitution, is to preside in the absence of the chairperson. Tell us how you would work under pressure, and how will you support executive and general body members in stressful situations without the guidance of chair?
So thank you for the question. I would first acknowledge that I will be assuming the role of not just one, but two positions as chairperson, as the acting chairperson and vice chairperson internal, if this were to happen. And I believe that I'm a big believer that everyone has the capacity to be able to grow and personalize the way that they carry out their responsibilities with or without that guidance. And although I can imagine that it could be a stressful experience to do both at the same time, it doesn't mean that I have to do it on my own. And I truly try to emphasize that the success of this board is not just built on the ability of one person to do their job, but the willingness of others to help in too. And I also have the privilege of having a co-position that share many of the same responsibilities as me. So the way that I would approach it, in the event that it does happen, is offering to share it with the vice chair external. And like from experience as PR, I spent a lot of time on board working under pressure to meet multiple deadlines for this club and school. So I think I've become more aware about how I prioritize my time and how to utilize the tools available to me, so I don't have to feel that pressure of being completely alone.
And you ready for your last question? Considering how big our board is and how widespread our members in our organization can be, how are you going to be able to keep this idea of unity among such a diverse group of people?
Thank you for your question. Can you repeat it one more time, please?
Yes. Considering how big our board is and how widespread our members in our organization can be, how are you going to keep How are you going to be able to keep this idea of unity among such a diverse group of people?
I believe that our idea of unity really stems from our emphasis on inclusivity. I think being able to keep this throughout the year, despite like our big general body, is through our auxiliaries, because they foster so much community for so many people, no matter like their interests and hobbies, and they even have the ability to foster more like another interest in another thing, such as like dance or media. And something that I liked from Sid's responses last year is like being able to connect with each other through fun discussions, because I believe that it's a great way to get different groups of people to interact with one another and to get to know one another, even if it just means for like a few minutes. In my opinion, like the past board has done a great job at like mending this issue of having cliques, and I feel like our general body has been more interconnected than ever because of our efforts, even though there are still traces of that today. But I believe that we can continue to uphold the spirit of like unity to really foster that inclusive environment.